Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, conversations with interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Jeff Cournoyer, class of 1999. All right, back with a guest this week. You don't have to listen to just me ramble for 20 minutes. Although, I was surprised at the response last week's episode got. People were digging it. Had a lot of people check in to say that they had a similar experience on their first trip back to the Hill in a long time, of realizing how much they took for granted or how little they appreciated some of the things that really should be appreciated about the campus. It's a weird feeling going back sometimes. It's kind of odd how you graduate from that place feeling like you own it. And then when you go back and realize that you don't own it. You're just borrowing it for a while you were a student there, because now the current students are really the ones owning the place. So imagine that feeling if you're an alum working for the school. Katie Boyer, class of 93, checked in and talked about how anytime she's on campus, she'll see somebody and say, hey, that's so-and-so that I graduated with. And then she realizes that, no, that person's now in their 50s. And speaking of Katie, like me, her voice can be heard on WHCL every week. She's the co-host of Continental Drift, which can be heard on 88.7 FM WHCL every Saturday at 9 p.m. Every week, it's a different theme, different types of music. It's a lot of fun. You check that out. Saturdays at 9 p.m., Continental Drift. Had a lot of people check in asking what it was I was doing on campus. As I said on the show last week, I can't tell you. Best I can do is tell you to donate a bunch of money to the school, and maybe you'll find out. And as I mentioned last week, it's looking like things are falling into place to have the legend herself, Marge, on as a guest for next week's episode. So if there's anything you want to hear me ask or talk about with the legendary dining hall worker, surrogate campus mother to just about every student that's been on campus since about 1996, let me know what you want to hear me talk about. I'm excited for that one. And I'm excited for this one. I've referenced a few times in the last few weeks a fishing trip I went on with some close friends and classmates, and the picture of 4 old men in fishing waders. Well, this week's guest, Jeff Cournoyer, was one of the other old men in the fishing waders with me. My friendship with Jeff runs deep. He went to high school with my wife, who's not a Hamilton grad. So he and another close friend of mine from Hamilton I have to thank for my marriage and my family. So this is a friendship that runs deep. And it's always fun for me when I have some close friends on, because I end up learning things I didn't know. I hear stories somehow that I never knew. And that's certainly the case with Jeff. And his career is one that I've always admired. So I thought it would be interesting to get into a little bit of that in the conversation. He's had stops in government. He served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for former Massachusetts State Senator Stephen Brewer. He spent time in professional sports, where he was Director of Communications for the Kraft Group, owners of the New England Patriots. And now he's in higher education, where he's had roles at Umass Lowell. He served as the VP of Communications for the entire Umass system. And he's now the Managing Director of the Mount Ida campus of Umass Amherst. It's interesting to hear the perspective of a Hamilton grad finding his way into higher ed and now having an entirely different view on higher education. This is a fun one. Hope you enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Jeff Cournoyer, class of 99.
What's up?
I think the picture is actually better.
Happy to go back to it for you. Whatever you need, Dave.
Clearly. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
You too.
It's a very, very nice office.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll be the 20th guest comments on your home studio there.
You know, you get it. The co-founder of Netflix gets it. I don't care who you are. You're looking at my blazers and my pants.
Nice,
Or actually, no, my wife's pants. Those are my wife's pants.
nice suit collection you have.
You know, I don't wear it anymore, but
I know, right? That's one of the things, right? All of these clothes that we don't need anymore.
I went to an event yesterday and I put on a blazer and I was like, I forgot what this felt like.
I'm trying to kill, in higher ed, there's at least on the administrative side, there's still a bit of a suit culture,
Uh-huh.
and I'm trying to kill it, at least in my little space here,
How's that working out for you?
We kind of built a narrative around this idea that, because we're primarily a professional development operation, experiential learning operation. And I'm pitching the concept that we want the students to experience what it's like to be, out in the real world and in business environments. And most businesses at this point are not still doing the suit and tie thing. Right. And so we're just walking the walk like we do in all other spaces, creating an environment that is akin to what they're going to experience when they're out there in the real world. I don't know who's buying it, but that's what I'm going with.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you take all their money away and make them fend for themselves?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Overcharge for everything, and
that's right.
Stretch them thin and grind them until they decide to leave. Yeah. No,
there you go.
We're a more supportive environment than that, or trying to be.
Well, I'm curious to talk about your foray into the world of higher education, but and it's always fun to do these with people that I'm friends with because I have conversations that I don't always have with them in the real world. Although you and I get into work conversations a lot, but if I go back to your Hamilton first, I actually don't think I know the answer to the question I ask a lot of people about how you ended up in Hamilton.
You don't know. I mean, it's crazy to think. I mean, this is going to be a wild ride, right? We've talked so much, but you're right. Yeah, I mean, why would we have ever really had that conversation?
Yeah.
Let's see. I was doing. I think you hear this a lot, right? I was doing the tour. I was in the upstate New York swing with my father, and Hamilton was on the list. We were there. This would have been what, late fall, early winter of '94, right? We graduated together.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I don't remember where we were staying, but we were close enough that we decided to go just take a drive onto campus the night before I was doing the tour and all that. So it was after dark, and my father and I drove onto campus and the place was dead. I mean, there was nothing going on. Like my initial reaction was, oh boy, because it was cold and it was like one of those cold, rainy nights. And we were just sort of kind of driving around trying to find some action or whatever. And the lights were on at the hockey arena. So we, sort of headed that way and started saying to my dad, maybe we'll go in and check it out. And we got stopped somewhere. We were still in the car, but we got stopped somewhere by someone who tried to turn us around. And we asked, can we go in and watch the game? And the guy said, it was clear there was a game going on. I should say that. But anyway, whoever it was said, no, there are no fans are allowed at this game. And we said, why? And he told us enough for us to figure it out afterwards. And then, of course, once I got there, and it all made more sense in context. But it was the second home game of that year. And at the first home game, which of course the Orange Bowl,
Oh yeah.
the students had gotten a little bit more overexcited than usual. The goal was scored, and the college, banned all students and I guess all fans from the next game, or at least the next game. Maybe it was longer than that.
I remember that sort of, it almost took on an urban legend sort of status of, oh, before you got here, it was, sex dolls were thrown on the ice and crazy things happened. And so that was that night.
I think that night was where it really just went beyond the pale. And because we heard some crazy stuff right. That we certainly saw in our experience. And of course, there's all those kind of legends and myths that aren't necessarily true. Right. But anyway, I was fascinated by that. And I thought it was the coolest thing that there was this tradition and that, the students had sort of taken it that far. So my interest was piqued at that point, and then, very similar experience, I think, to a lot of people. Then it took the tour the next day. The weather was much nicer. It was winter, but it was, it's your prototypical, kind of Northeast college campus, and it was still very quiet. I mean, I don't even, for all I know, it was a long weekend or something. But decided that if that Hamilton was going to be high on my list, and of course, likely story, it was the best school I got into, and so the decision was sort of made at that point.
Yeah, I was just on campus last week, or a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to some students, including a hockey player, and he was gearing up for the season, and I was asking if the Citrus Bowl was still a thing, and he said it was still a thing in that it's called the Citrus Bowl, but they've cracked down tremendously on getting anything in. So there is no citrus that actually hits the ice. And I was remembering that they, after the because of the story you tell, they cracked down, but we still managed to find our way in and with some oranges.
Well, that whole thing, it was just sort of defining, of our experience and my experience, I think, because of that being my first sort of introduction to the college. And so, as the family business I grew up in is a independent grocery store. And so I believe it was our freshman year. It must have been, I had my father ship me like a 55 count case of oranges. Do you remember this at all?
No, this is a new story for me. I didn't know this.
Yeah. So, my dad was, amongst his many responsibilities with the family business, he was the produce manager and the produce buyer or whatever. So, and I worked in the produce department, whatever. And so I asked him to ship me a case of oranges. And so he did. I don't remember I don't know how I don't remember at all how it got there, but I had a case of oranges, and, we all had our pockets, we were totally, cause most of the kids would, just sort of take what they could from the dining hall.
Yeah. Right.
So we were, packed to the gills in oranges, and then we still had probably 30, maybe more oranges in the case. So we just left it on the steps in front of the hockey facility. And, we saw people kind of walk, grabbing them as they went. So, yeah. And it wasn't like, even though it was I think there was more tension about that game because it was the year following that incident that we were just talking about. So we were all worried that they were going to be patting us down and, that they were going to be tossing people out at the first sign of anything. But no, sure enough, that first goal was scored, and, the ice was covered, and, great kick out of it. Traditions are great,
Yeah, that's funny. You and I texted about this, but I talked about on the last episode of the show about my visit and sort of some of the experiences I had, and you took your family up to campus pretty recently, and it sounds like you had some similar experiences. Talk about what it was like being back, because it was, I think, first time back for you in a long time, right?
Yeah, it was my first time back on campus since graduation day, or whenever we moved out. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I've never been back. I've never had
wow.
Had reason to. I mean, Would you go to the? Did you go to the fifth reunion?
I went to the
Which one did you
fifth,
went?
and then I went back for a handful of rugby alumni games, and then I think I spoke on like a career panel at some point. But yeah, it had been probably about 15 years or so for me. More
Yeah,
for
I
you.
mean, I had a bunch of kind of near misses on, rugby things
Mhm.
and different things that didn't work out for whatever reason. And then, we were going to, as a group, going to make our triumphant return for our what it would have been our 20th, right?
20, yeah.
And I got sick, and you guys all decided to stay back with me, which was awesome.
Yeah, we're good friends. We're really good people.
You guys really are. Well, you in particular.
It goes without saying.
Yeah. But anyway, so first time back on campus, and then whatever it is now, 22, what were we at, 22 years, 23 years? We did last summer, this past summer, kind of family road trip, which is not something that we've done before, but COVID and whatever, and the kids being the right ages, we decided to do a sort of pack up the car and do a sort of camping, glamping road trip that would, kind of take us from the Boston area where we live to Niagara Falls and back. And so I planned, as part of that, a stop on the way back at Hamilton. And I was really looking forward to it for all the reasons why you would expect. And yeah, I think we had a very similar, I was there for a much shorter period of time than you were, but very similar sort of kind of weird, surreal, kind of walking back through your life kind of moment. And, appreciating a bunch of things that I would have never appreciated, particularly, like you said, just the beauty and the views and the quality of the facilities and the history and the architecture and everything that, I think just because we were young and dumb and didn't realize how lucky we were to be there,
Right.
You just thought that's what college was.
Right.
Right. You saw you'd go visit friends at other places or whatever and realize that culture, environment, sort of those things were different. And certainly there were places that didn't have as much history and were didn't have that same sort of traditional kind of Northeast small college feel. But even then, even knowing that Hamilton was unique in that way, I don't think we appreciated just
certainly not
how beautiful it is.
Certainly not. One of the things that more I've thought about it, with all the new buildings, which are all incredible and the facilities are obviously amazing, what made me realize is, and I've talked about this with a lot of people before, is we were obviously there at a point of transition, but not just because of the Res Life decision, because of so many of those buildings hadn't been built yet. We were living, you think about it, so much of our experience, especially because of the Res Life decision, we experienced the campus through what things used to be, right? We had parties in the Bundy Dining Hall. It was no longer a dining hall, but it was still known as the Bundy Dining Hall. We had parties in the basement of ELS, which used to be something else, right? All of it, we lived it through it. So it felt like we were on someone else's campus because these are all these buildings with a history that had nothing to do with us. The pub was the one place, because it was new when we were there, that felt like we had a connection to it because it was new for us. And there's so much now of that with a lot of these students, even so much now, like all those old fraternity houses all have these new names that these old students know by. They don't even know the old history of those buildings. So it feels more like their campus. Whereas we felt like, at least in retrospect, feel like, we were like walking around on someone else's campus.
Yeah. I mean, it was a weird time. You and I have talked about this a lot. I know you've talked about it a lot on the show. It was, there was, I didn't appreciate it at the time, from an administrative standpoint. And obviously, now I have a better appreciation for what the college as an institution was going through in trying to sort of accommodate the students who they'd put through this, real significant sort of social cultural change, by eliminating the fraternity houses or eliminating the fraternity houses as residential locations anyway at that time. But we were, it's funny to think about that, some of that, right? Some like allowing, groups of students or actual formalized student life organizations or whatever you call it, Greek organizations or sports teams or whatever, to just reserve these spaces on campus that they had designated as kind of social spaces and throw parties that were akin to at least as far as we could tell, they were frat parties. I mean, they weren't any different really in terms of, the location was different, but my sense was this must be what a frat party was like at a frat house. The only difference is we're standing on this like large linoleum floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now with some time to look back on it, I'm curious how much they were sort of letting go some fairly obvious kind of like, turning a blind eye a little bit to, a sanctioned event,
right?
Where the amount of drinking and sort of shenanigans that were going on.
It's so true. I was standing when I was just back there, and I was taking a long trip down memory lane across the campus, and I was standing. I had that exact thought, standing on that terrace on Bristol, the outdoor area where we had several rugby events in broad daylight.
Yeah.
And I stood there thinking, how did we get away with this? Because I'm not sure. I think statute of limitations is okay, but I don't think everyone was 21 at that event, Jeff. And it was like 4:00 in the afternoon in broad daylight. We're out there like people drinking like maniacs. And it was never.
That's the thing I'm not sure about. It'd be an interesting thing to. I don't know if you talked to Bev about it, but it'd be an interesting thing to ask somebody because, sort of referenced earlier that we at one point we started venturing off campus and visiting our friends at other college campuses, across the mainland or whatever, and went to some places. I remember we have a mutual friend who at the time was at Bryant College, which is now Bryant University, but it was Bryant College at the time. And I remember feeling like I was in a police state. I mean, you had to check in, even if you were a resident in a dorm, you had to check in with the sort of security person at the front, and then the RAs were, omnipresent, and the students were trying to do all the same things with, sneak a beer in and all that other stuff, but people were checking bags, and who knows what was going on at that institution that prompted that, because obviously sometimes those protocols are prompted by, serious issues. But I remember, realizing how only having seen the other side, realizing how lax the sort of protocols were around, particularly that issue, like student drinking. Yeah. I remember having, the campus security like helping us carry like big cases of remember those like bar. You weren't a drinker at the time, but like they were like these big bar cases of Milwaukee's Best.
They were all they were all over campus. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And they were because they were bar bottles and bar cases, they were heavier than a typical case of beer, right? So I remember like campus security like helping, not as freshmen, helping us carry them into our dorm rooms, right? And just to be helpful on it, you know what I mean? And it really was.
It was basically as long as you didn't have a keg in your room, you were okay, right? It was just don't bring kegs into the dorms and you're all right.
Yeah, I mean, we got dinged. I was in a quad freshman year in South, and we got in trouble because we had essentially framed out a wall in the room with those cases, with like cases of empties. Must have reeked of stale. I can't even. Must have reeked so much of stale beer, but we basically built a new wall we had like one of those quads that had 2 rooms and a bathroom, and we separated one of the rooms with a wall made of those Milwaukee's Best cases. And so the RA came in, I don't remember what for, and was like, "What's this?" And we were like, it's a wall of beer cases. And she wrote us up and we got in trouble for that. But the for the most part, I don't remember that being a concern. Like I don't remember sitting around having a few drinks in a room and feeling like I needed to be hiding from anybody.
Yeah.
Which obviously is much different than the experience that.
And even beyond the drinking, like I was struck, and I remember this walking around the campus on my last visit, just how open everything is. Like even when I was just walking around and, not late at night, but it was in the evening, through almost every inch of the athletic facility into other buildings. I was over by Welland Hall, and one day, and I was walking through, and I was like, I'd like to poke in there to see to remember how nice it was. And I'm like, I don't think I can go in there now. It's closed. And it's open. And then, you could walk anywhere. And even then I felt like I was trespassing, but I was like, I guess not. I guess you can just go anywhere. You really could just go anywhere you want.
Totally. Yeah. And I had a little bit of a different experience when I was up there, and it would have been in August of this year. I think it was a weekend day, and I was expecting to do exactly what you're saying, like bring the kids to, the bookstore and go check out some classrooms and that sort of stuff. And there were more things locked up on that day. I'm not sure. But in general, from a student experience standpoint, yeah, you had 24-hour access to the whole facility.
Yeah.
Which is unique, I think, to the place and to, it being for the most part an enclosed campus, in terms of, it's not like it's in an urban location where there's a natural population mix going on there that you would need to be concerned about, or even in a, somewhere where you don't expect that most of the people walking around are affiliated with the college in some way. And that, yeah, again, like, I'm not sure it's something we appreciated at the time.
No, not at all.
Being able to go even even library hours and
right.
At the time, computer lab hours and those sorts of things, which it was just sort of a given. It was an expectation that you were going to be able to do what you wanted to do when you needed to do it. Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then what were you? So you were a government guy, DC guy. I don't imagine working in higher ed was the plan. At least I know it wasn't. What were your career aspirations coming out of Hamilton?
Yeah, I was a government major, economics minor, and I wanted to go into politics or policy, something in that realm. That was the goal at graduation. It was, at the time, and I think you were in the same boat. Like, The West Wing was, the most popular TV show, and I really had this sort of romantic idea that I wanted to be the sort of person behind the person kind of role, like that staff member that's consulted and always has the right, always has the exact right idea at the right time, and
Did you see yourself as Josh or as Sam?
I think more Sam.
Okay.
But what was great about that show was it focused on the staff, right? Like, the president was sort of made appearances and did big dramatic speeches, but it was really about the work that was happening in the background that was interesting, and I was really into that, and I was interested in government and politics, and wanted to study that. Knew I was going to study that at some level. And so I did a semester in DC. I did the DC program junior year. I was off campus for all of junior year because then I studied abroad at St. Andrews in Scotland the second semester. But did the DC program. When I was there, I interned for a public policy firm, but that firm was focused on policy conferences. So they were a sort of independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit group called the Public Forum Institute that worked with sponsor members of Congress primarily who had some sort of policy issue that they were aligned with for political or constituent service reasons. And we would help them put on conferences in their district where experts would come in, whether it was healthcare or education or transportation, whatever the case may be. And so it was a sort of education in policy, federal policy specifically, but also kind of an event planning agency. And I really liked it, and I turned out to be pretty good at it. And so the initial plan was to leave after graduation to go to the New York area and work for George Little Management, which was an events planning firm. And I think I've told you in the past, like, I didn't even realize that I hadn't even made the connection that the Little Pub, that was sort of the result of a gift. But
did you know the Hamilton connection to?
only because I was recruited on campus for that.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And I knew that for the most part, a lot of the places that came onto campus to recruit were because of sort of alumni connections or there was. And so that had been the plan. I had a job. That's where I was going. And then I caught a hospital pass from Derek Brand, rugby field, at Colgate.
It was a literal hospital pass.
Yeah. I got a bad pass from Derek Brand, who to this day, I still feels bad about it and should, and shattered my femur, and spent the rest of the spring semester of my senior year at home with my leg strapped in a continuous passive motion machine. As a result of that, I didn't, had a conversation with the firm about whether or not, and they were sort of like, we do events. So, if you're not mobile, we'll find something for you to do, but, it's going to be a different job. I think, the sort of labor rules, and HR rules were different in those days. They could say, oh, you're sorry, you can't work here anymore. So I sort of, kind of floated around for a little bit, decided to move to Boston instead of New York, and was just looking for something in that sort of government, either on the sort of legislative side or the administrative side. Worked the door at the White Horse Tavern in Allston for a couple of months, and then landed a job working for a state senator in the Massachusetts State Senate. And so I was a legislative liaison to begin, and then worked in the State House on the State Senate side for the first 4 or 5 years of my career. So I was able to immediately apply the degree.
And then along the way, realized that you weren't going to be Sam Seaborn and wanted to go walk the sidelines of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always, had some elements of, in every position I've had, there's always been some sort of government relations component to it. And so I've always been able to sort of scratch that itch a little bit. But what I realized, because I don't recall anyway at Hamilton taking any journalism classes or sort of what you would consider now to be sort of communications classes, PR or that sort of thing. I think, I took, persuasive writing and that sort of stuff. But when I was working in state government, in the state legislature, I realized what I most enjoyed about, that sort of legislative staffer job. What I most enjoyed about it and what I was best at were the sort of communications components, right? Which is looking back on it, no surprise. I was, the intensive writing kind of curriculum at Hamilton, and I think I arrived at Hamilton a good writer and only got much stronger as a result of that. And then when I got out, got out into the working world, realized how much of a differentiating factor that was for me. Sort of. The ability to write well, write persuasively and quickly and consistently and so on. So, I really enjoyed, writing press releases and writing speaking points for the senator and, the sort of consensus building and media relations and all of that sort of press secretary communications side of that business. And so from that point, decided I wanted to go into, make my next step be to go more in the direction of public relations, communications, corporate communications. And so, started applying for jobs at traditional sort of PR firms in the Boston area, and then being not necessarily at the entry level point of my career, but sort of that kind of whatever that next step up from there, however you would describe it. Realized as I was going on these interviews that, I had the skill set, but I didn't have, I was competing against other candidates who had spent those early years, kind of pursuing a career. So I didn't have the vocabulary for it. I knew what it was, but I couldn't explain it well. And I hadn't figured out sort of how to apply my past experiences to, what the positions I was looking at would actually be. So I decided to go to graduate school for communications, and did a master's program at Boston University in corporate communications, which was a really good experience for me. And there was that first summer in between, when I decided to go full time. You just sort of kind of take out it was a 3-semester program. So I decided to just kind of take out the loans and work a couple jobs and make it work. But there was a summer break. It wasn't one of those you just went straight through. They actually had a more traditional, I think probably different now, but it was a regular sort of academic schedule with semesters. And so you're in this, when you were a full-time student, you were in this weird position as a graduate student and I was an older graduate student at that point. I was like 27. What are you going to do for that summer in between, right? It felt strange to do to just go get a bartending job or something. And, because I had taken that kind of period of my life to focus on my career. That's why I was in graduate school. So I thought I should probably do an internship, but even that felt a little bit weird because I was a little bit older and I had professional experience, and it felt strange to be applying for internships at the time. I mean, looking back, it wasn't strange. But anyway, long story short, because I think this is what you were getting at, I was able to talk my way into a summer internship working for the New England Patriots, which was sort of a dream gig for me at the time because I was, still am a huge football fan, and I was grew up in Massachusetts and New England and have always been a big Patriots fan. So I got an internship in the media relations department for the Patriots that summer, which, kind of took us from my first day. This was 2005, kind of early summer, late spring of 2005. And my first day working for the Patriots was the ring ceremony for the 2004 Super Bowl championship team. So that was my first day in it. And then I went through the summer sort of preparation for training camp, all that fun stuff, went through training camp. And then I had one more semester to do on my master's, but I was able to sort of work things out where I was still in classes and on a sort of condensed schedule. I was still working as a writing tutor at the Writing Center at BU, College of Communication, but I had pretty much a full-time internship, or it was a graduate assistant position in the communications department for the Patriots for that 2005 season. And that's how that initial transition into sports went.
One of my favorite memories of you working for the Patriots, and there are many, is when I was living in New York and looking and interviewing for a job to move up to Boston, and I had a night to kill in Boston, and you and I were going to get together for a drink, and you had texted me saying, "I'm going to be late. Something's about to break. Watch the TV and you'll know why." And I was sitting in a hotel bar, and I think minutes after that text came in, there was Randy Moss traded from the Patriots. And I was like, I think that's what Jeff was talking about. It must have been fun to have that sort of front row seat to a lot of things that a lot of people care about.
Yeah. And evidence to that is I had no idea where you were going with that story, because it could have been 100 things, 1,000 things that would have prompted something's about to break text from me. It was very, like anybody, and you work at the NFL now. There's a level of excitement and energy to being involved in something that people care about, right? And that are interested in and want to talk to you about all the time. It's exhausting, actually, right? You're probably getting there now. You reach a point where it becomes such a part of your identity. The only thing you talk about at cocktail parties, the only thing your uncle wants to talk to you about at a family gathering, right? That you do, and I think this happens to a lot of people. You lose any sense of a combination of A, that being the thing that people think is most interesting about you, and B, you working so much that you don't have time to have any other kind
Right.
of hobbies or
Right.
pursuits. That, it becomes your identity. And that's cool. And it's exciting. And so I was there. I worked for the Patriots from the 2005 season through the 2012 season. So, in various kind of roles, I was my first full-time position after that graduate assistant position was as a new position for corporate communications within the sort of traditional media relations department. And then, I was the assistant director of media relations. I was the director of corporate communications. But the whole time sort of working on the day-to-day football operations, communications team under Stacey James, who's the VP of media relations communications for the Patriots and is a mentor of mine, and absolutely not only one of the best in the business, but one of the hardest working people you'll ever meet. And so, I was there from the 05 season to the 12 season through the 12 season through the draft, the 2013 draft. And I think I'm still of the sort of modern era, what people would consider the Belichick era, the longest tenured employee of the Patriots to not have a Super Bowl ring, because, as I mentioned, I started right after the 2004 Super Bowl, and I left before the next one. It was in modern Patriots terms, it was a long drought, and I realize how ridiculous that is for most NFL fans. But never went to two Super Bowls. Was on the sideline for one of them, lost both of them against your team there, and missed out on that opportunity, but an incredible experience nonetheless.
I wasn't gonna bring up, some know it as the long drought, some know it as the Cournoyer curse. I wasn't gonna bring that up, but you did. You went there. But to your point about, you get to a point, and I certainly can relate in many ways of it becomes a job. Right. But I still have moments where I was just out in our LA office, and where the NFL Network is, where we have a lot of the network talent, many of which are former players or coaches, and be in the cafeteria next to, Patriots, Willie McGinnis, and there's still a moment of, oh yeah, that's Willie McGinnis. I mean, the two questions for you is, at some point there still had to be a moment of, holy shit, that's Tom Brady. And the wonderment of standing on the Super Bowl. There are, most people in this country never get to go to the Super Bowl. Forget about stand on the sideline. Do you allow yourself a moment standing on the sideline being like, holy shit, I'm at the Super Bowl?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and those moments came, like you said, everything becomes work at some point, regardless of what you're doing. It doesn't matter, but even just, in the case of the Patriots, this isn't true for all teams, but for the Patriots, their facility is all kind of centralized at Gillette Stadium. Their practice facility, all their front office, everything is there. So when you work for the Patriots, you work at Gillette Stadium, and even just every day driving up to the stadium, parking in the parking lot, and walking into that building for work. You never, I don't, for most people anyway, you never stop appreciating that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I was lucky enough to be in one of the areas of the organization that interacted regularly with the players, right? So the communication staff is setting up all the press conferences, doing the daily, at the time, pre-COVID, when there was such a thing as locker room access for media. You're in the locker room every day. You're helping set up interviews. You're talking to the players about certain media interests they have, or things they've agreed to that you're helping them make sure they meet those obligations. And so I don't think you ever, if you're a football fan anyway, or you're even just a sports fan, I don't think you ever you'd ever stop appreciating that you're lucky to be there. Mm-hmm. And that you're having an experience that a lot of people would kill to have.
Yeah.
But you're also, you're
working your ass off.
Yeah, you're making the sausage, and you're grinding and you're missing out. I mean, when you choose to do this, a lot of, a lot of jobs are like this, but when you choose one of these alternate schedule kind of positions, and where the rest of the world, or the people who you want to be seeing have sort of synchronized kind of downtime, whether that be, evenings or weekends or whatever, you're basically unavailable from the end of July until at least January, if not kind of early February. A lot of the years I was there.
Yeah. So then, how do you make the jump from walking the sidelines at the Super Bowl to higher ed?
I kind of got to the point. So I had Charlie, our first, while I was still with the Patriots, and then we had, I don't remember if Angie, my daughter was on the way at that point, or we were, at least Karen and I were planning on having Angie, but kind of victim of my own success sort of thing. I had sort of created this role within the Patriots organization that had kind of elevated into the Kraft Group, which is the holding company that has all of the sort of Kraft family's properties and real estate and media and philanthropy and paper products and also includes the Patriots and the Revolution and Gillette Stadium, real estate too. And so I was doing a lot of work on. I sort of came into that role as they were starting to really invest in the property around the stadium, which is now Patriot Place. I was in this role where I had football, but I also was doing communications for these other entities, these other properties, and these other pursuits. And I was working, 30 weekends a year, and not, taking Monday and Tuesday off because I had worked through the weekend. It was just, if something was going, and this is true for a lot of people in the business, when there are events on the weekends, you're there and you're working, and sometimes that's a 12-hour day. That could be an 18-hour day, depending on what's going on. And then you're back in the office on Monday morning. I was reaching that kind of fork in the road on sort of sustainable lifestyle if we wanted to continue to grow our family, and if my wife wanted to continue to work, and she did. So, we're trying to transition into a similar sort of role, but at a place where I would have, if not more work-life balance, at least more predictability in my schedule. So I never actually thought that I wasn't looking for a position in higher ed. It was just one of those situations where I saw this position at UMass Lowell, University of Massachusetts Lowell, that, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, Dave. I read the job description and I said that this was right for me, right? It felt exactly like they were looking for somebody with the exact experience and skill set that I had at the time, and I was looking for a position to, do the things that they were looking for somebody to do. It just really kind of fell into place. And so I went up and interviewed for the position and was, went through the process and was offered it. And I transitioned out of professional sports into higher ed, public higher ed at that, which was, total culture shock, total shift in sort of workplace environments and all that other stuff. But and I remember at the time people being like, what are you doing? Like, what is going on? You going out to pasture? What's happening there? And calling some of those people a few months later and being like, I'm as busy as I've ever been. More work-life balance, a little bit of a, more of a culture of including your family and activities and those sorts of things. But still, big, like any place, big problems, big challenges, exciting opportunities, and with plenty of work to do. And I kind of hit the ground running, and I've been at UMass in various roles at UMass ever since.
And talk about your current role.
So now I'm the managing director of the Mount Ida campus of UMass Amherst. So I was at UMass Lowell I was the associate vice chancellor for public affairs, overseeing community relations, media relations, government relations, which was very similar to what I was doing when I was at the Patriots. When I left UMass Lowell, I went to the UMass president's office. UMass, sort of like the NFL, is a sort of system of campuses, franchises, and then a central office like you work in the league office. And so I was the vice president of communications in the system office for several years in between, and then was asked to go to UMass Amherst to run a new campus that they had acquired when the former Mount Ida College in Newton closed. And so UMass Amherst acquired that campus, this campus where I am now.
We should have done this. We should have done this in person, by the way.
We probably should have. I'm like your break glass in case of emergency guest. So I just, you asked me to get to a computer, and here I am. Anyway, so the Mount Ida campus is a secondary instructional site for UMass Amherst. It's what we have designed as a center for professional development and experiential learning for students. And so the concept here is UMass Amherst, which is the flagship public campus in Massachusetts, is like a lot of land grant institutions, kind of located in the more rural section of the state in Western Massachusetts, in this case, which is distanced from the sort of center of gravity in Massachusetts, which is the city of Boston and the Boston area, where most, the majority of the sort of economic activity, business activity in the state is sort of concentrated in this area. And so, the university realized that one of the trends in higher education is, more hands-on experiential learning for students, internships, co-ops, those sorts of things. In order to provide UMass Amherst students more opportunity to do internships and co-ops, while they're at UMass Amherst, they needed a sort of touch point or landing space in the Boston area where students can live, take some courses, and then leave campus and go out into the greater Boston area to do internships or have other sort of hands-on learning opportunities. So I now oversee the day-to-day of this campus, interface with my colleagues in Amherst to sort of make this place as useful as it can be to UMass Amherst, to the UMass system, to the Commonwealth overall. And so that's been a fun project. It's a little bit of a blank slate. I was able to work with faculty and staff and other colleagues and other stakeholders, folks from the city, folks from the system, to put together a strategic plan for the campus when I first arrived here, and now I'm focused on executing that plan.
What's surprised you making the move into higher ed? What's something that people who aren't intimately familiar with the inner workings of a college campus, would they be surprised to learn?
It's a great question. I mean, it wasn't what surprised me because I had no idea, to be honest. I knew that, I had gone to college and graduate school. And so that was that was sort of my experience. And like I said, I was, sort of hired into a very specific role where, it was clear to them and to me that I needed to learn about, the business of higher education, and learn about, the shared governance and the faculty's role and university decision making and all of that sort of stuff. So, everything was new to me. I didn't have anything to be surprised by, because I sort of went in kind of wide-eyed and looking to learn about it. I'd say now, having been in higher ed for 8 years or whatever it is now, and thinking through the lens of, the Hamilton experience is that, there is such, there's 3,500 four-year campuses in the country. I mean, there are so many places, delivering, education to college age students, and they're all doing, similar things, with different expertise, different sort of profiles, and liberal arts versus, research universities, and everything in between. But every place is unique to itself, even within, the few places I've been within the UMass system, and talking to my colleagues on other campuses. Well, every place has similar challenges, but the higher ed is a place where, sort of the culture of an institution, the history of an institution, the setting, the demographics, really drive, the environment that you're in. And so in that way, they're so different. It's a very diverse industry in terms of what a mission of a college or university is, in terms of what types of students they're trying to serve, what service they're providing to their host communities, or for a public institution, their states or regions. And, the sort of faculty expertise, who the faculty are on a campus defines what that campus is. The faculty, the sine qua non, the important thing. Those centers are built around, that faculty expertise, and the students gravitate towards those programs that are distinguish themselves, and want to be around, experts in their field, and that, that's different at every place. And so for people who move around more within higher ed, they have incredible opportunity to experience different environments within one industry, more so I think than a lot of other industries.
And a lot of that, but what you talk about, also creates a bit of an arms race, which, has made much has been written and said about the future of the business of higher ed. What's your outlook now that you're somewhat involved in that arms race?
Yeah, I mean, it's different, again, depending on who you are, who you're serving, what your mission is. There are certain sort of, peer groups and competitive sets, and folks that we would compare ourselves to, or Hamilton would compare themselves to, obviously. The arms race thing is, what it boils down to is kind of the competition for students, right? And you're going to see that, it's always been there, but it's going to really start to ramp up here over the next decade or so, because particularly in the Northeast, there's, what we refer to as a kind of demographic decline coming. There are going to be, we're already getting there, fewer college age students available, to colleges and universities than we've had here for a long period of time. And the reason for that is I'm sure there are many reasons, but the primary reason is because, around the time of the Great Recession, 2008, particularly in the Northeast, families stopped having children, or as many children, and for economic reasons. And even when the economy improved, the birth rate never recovered. It kind of became the new norm that family, and there are a lot. It wasn't just economic. There are other reasons for that, but there are just now, those babies who would have been born 2007, 2008, 2009, here in a couple of years would be graduating from college, and there's just fewer high school graduates than there were before. And so, it's gotten more competitive for enrollment at all levels of higher ed. There were fewer students, and starting in 2026 or so, there are going to be a lot fewer students. And so that competition that, again, has always existed there is really going to ramp up in terms of, if your organization is built to have 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 students. Colleges and universities now need to decide, are we going to, do the things we're going to need to do to increase our market share, to meet our enrollment numbers, with a smaller pool of candidates for students, or are we going to get smaller and start to plan for lower enrollment, which is, can be, as you might expect, can be painful for an organization to do. And so, it's arms race is sort of a, catch-all way of saying, I think people equate it with like, lazy rivers and, really nice dining halls and that sort of stuff. and there's an element of that, right? You're to the extent that you are marketing yourself to prospective students as a place they want to be, you want to make sure you're delivering on, their expectation of what their college experience is going to be. But it's also just the competition for enrollment is, increasing. And so how are you differentiating yourself? How are you marketing yourself? What's the value proposition? I mean, students these days, much more so than our generation, the data suggests are, shopping for a college education more from a kind of ROI perspective, like would a home or a car, what am I going to put in terms of my financial commitment, and what am I going to get back in terms of, how marketable and employable I am as a result after the fact, and doing that calculation in a much more sophisticated way.
Well, that must make your campus a real interesting offering, a real differentiator. If people are looking at it that way, and you're offering real, closer opportunities to professional development, that seems to put you all in a pretty good position.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly one of the things that we're attempting to do. As much to provide students with the educational experience that they want and deserve, but also, from a competitive standpoint, because, to that point, even casual observers know, and many people know from their own experiences that a great path to a full-time employment post-graduation is to have done an internship while you're in college. You and I were lucky enough to be able to do that, and those were certainly formative experiences for us. And that's the case for many people. And so the option to do internships, to participate in co-ops, is directly related to, postgraduate employment and earning potential and all of those other things. And so that's something that you need to be offering to students, and institutions, at least in Massachusetts, institutions that are in the Boston area, can do that in a more organic way because they have access to, the businesses and industry that are in this region. We had to provide a bridge to that because Umass Amherst is located, 80 plus miles away. And so that's what we're trying to do here.
Well, if Hamilton gets a lazy river, I think that's maybe where the alumni will put their foot down. Say
they don't have one yet?
Maybe they need one. I don't know. I guess so.
I didn't see it on my.
No, I didn't see it either. Although they have automated golf bays, like the like you would see it, at a bar, which I didn't get a chance to play with that, but I want to go check that out.
I'm not at all surprised by that.
So government, sports, higher ed, it's a truly interesting career path. And I'm not just saying that because you're a guest on the show and a friend. It truly is interesting. If you think back across that career path and arriving on campus from Central Massachusetts, anything you wish you had known?
I think, we didn't talk a lot about this actually, but I think the thing I wish I had done differently is sort of less related to my educational pursuits or sort of my professional development or career planning. And it was more personal. And I think you've heard this from a lot of people. I wish I had been kinder to myself and less sort of conscious of what other people thought of me, and had been more comfortable in my own skin. I feel like I missed out on, not in a way that impacted me from a career standpoint, or personally at all. Actually, I just from my own experience day to day there, I wish I had just cared less about what was going on around me and had relaxed a little bit.
Yeah.
I spent way too much time and energy on sort of worrying about what the perception was of decisions I was making and things I was doing, and not doing them for my own, my own growth and development. So that's the thing I wish I had known. I think from a professional standpoint, I think from my own kind of career path, I think the things that I've sort of carried with me from place to place as I've hopped around a little bit have been, those sort of Hamilton skills of being able to communicate ideas persuasively, writing well, critical thinking, and being that kind of person behind the person kind of advice, being able to look at a situation and give good advice based on the information available and the inputs at the time, I think have really, helped me be successful in every stop, kind of regardless of field. And so, I think that's the liberal arts education, right? Is working on trying a lot of things and working on sort of core skills that will serve you in any role you have.
And I think you're proof of it, of the sort of the government, sports, higher ed can all on paper look very different, but that's sort of the idea behind it. I know you had a kind of common theme throughout, but and even now the changes you made through in higher ed are because you're able to be well-rounded. It's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Before I let you go, I let it slide through without saying anything because I know your story, but you referenced being sick. For those who don't know, you're good. Health-wise, you're good. Make everybody feel good that you're okay.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to figure out why you were making that point, because I referenced, yes, no, I'm not. Yeah, got a pity party here. No, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer a couple of years ago at age 41. And that was the reason it happened. What was it? Like literally, I got the diagnosis like Thursday before we were supposed to go to our 20 year reunion. Yeah. And so I'm fine. Thank you for asking. I did the surgeries and chemo and all that fun stuff. And I'm lucky enough to be in the monitoring phase, but post-treatment and feeling fine and no incidents of disease, and got a little bit of ways to go to be out of the woods. But I am one of the lucky ones.
Good. And we're happy for that. I didn't want to let that slide. There's inevitably someone who tells me that I missed a follow-up question that people would want to know. Usually you're the one who tells me what follow-up questions I missed, but since you won't be able to do it, I did it for myself. I want to make sure people heard that. I'm
not going to be able to criticize your performance on this particular one because I don't think I'm going to listen to it. We'll see, but I can imagine. I can imagine choosing to not listen to this because it will crawl inside myself and probably not come out for a very long time if I did.
Well, I enjoyed it very much.
I apologize to your listeners.
No, I enjoyed it very much, Jeff. Thank you.
I love you, buddy.
Love you too, bud. Thank you. All right, that's my friend, Jeff Cournoyer, class of 1999. Amazing how you can know somebody for so long and have a conversation with them and still learn new things. It's a fun thing I get out of being able to do this, is to force my friends into having conversations with me about things that we don't normally talk about. I enjoyed that one. And I don't think I've ever told him that I was impressed with his career path, which I am. So I'm glad I got a chance to do that. I'm glad I got a chance to talk to Jeff in a different way. my thanks to Jeff Cournoyer for joining us week. You have been listening to Had I Known on WHCL FM, Clinton, New York. HadIKnown.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on the show. And once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week.
Had I Known podcast show on your radio or take it to go.